me an intro of who you are, where we at, and talk about your life, basically.
I am Michi Meko. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm an artist. I'm also a fly fisher and just an all-around creative person. There's always been this sort of history or curiosity of me sort of remixing what's already been made, like the ready-made. I think it goes back for me like to Hot Wheels. Like I've sort of customized Hot Wheels when I was a child and put sequins on the tires, so when you roll the wheels it looked like shiny rims, and paint flames where there weren't supposed to be flames, or tint the windows where the windows weren't tinted. I think from those Hot Wheels, from being a kid and building model cars and doing all that stuff, it's never left my life. The origin of this work sort of started as me looking for a way to create a map that was flexible enough to provide a black male with safe passage through public space. Over 2020, I think that I had a moment to where I began to wonder, what if the wilderness space or the mountains or the wild looked back at us, and what would it say? And what would its judgments of us be? So I begin to think about these paintings and my work as these internal maps, and using the landscape as a place of internal space. They deal a lot with the psychological abstraction, mark making, also color theory, which the works are a heavy black. And a lot of this newer work reflects on those moments where I am the landscape. So in a way, these works are portraits. We have our own peaks, we have our own valleys, we have our own rivers, we have our own sort of wild spaces that we need to explore to go and see like who we are internally. Just like sort of use photos of places I've been or places that I'm sort of present in or standing at as like these sort of quick references. Okay, boom, oh, that's beautiful. Put it away and then lay out that image. And then from there, that's where the memory part starts to fail. And then that's where all the other landscapes start to bleed into this one that I'm trying to do. But that also leaves room for the abstractions. It all sort of performs as jazz, or it all sort of performs as hip hop or punk rock. It's just me in the improv. Within those gray areas of taking these green sort of lush places or these brown desert places or wherever, when the sun goes down, it all becomes black and gray anyways. When all those vegetation and all that stuff starts to go black and gray, and then the only light, it seems like that's projected like from moon or stars, is a light in between the branches. I'm more interested in looking at that, using it as metaphor, and then moving beyond what we see into something more philosophical or something more psychological that can happen within. There's a lot of room in there for an image to break down so that something then can be reinvented. How do you tell the story, not only of yourself, but then of your people within a painting minus the body?
Let it fly, let it fly. Yeah, real talk, I need a drum roll, all ears. Now I got him like Dumbo, weatherman, tripping with, I need a poncho, sleepwalking, face stepping with my eye closed. Yeah, 40,000 for the dumb flow, top 10. If you need it, I'ma send more. Rubber bands, what is that for? Cock it back, let it fly out the window.
These journeys, it's sort of become this creative sort of mission, or this way of me expressing myself through the work, but also through fly fishing.
Real talk, I need a drum roll, all ears. Now I got him like Dumbo. Weatherman, dripping wet, I need a poncho. Sleepwalking, face stacking with my eyes closed.
Yeah, I can believe that. In like 2017, I was invited out to do a project in Lone Pine, California. I was going to do a project called Black in Wilderness, and I was going to teach myself to fly fish, and I was going to tie these flies out of unconventional materials. So at that time, I was tying flies out of burlap, cotton, because we're in the South. I was using my dreadlocks. I was using anything that I could find. So I gathered all this material, took it out to the desert, and taught myself to tie flies in my little, Big Agnes tent. Found the Bishop River and tried my best to cast in the wind and fish these flies. And I absolutely sucked at it. Something happened around the pandemic where I could sort of recognize that I was going to need a project to keep my brain occupied. And for some reason, I pulled out that vise and I pulled out that fly rod and was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate my whole 2020 to fly fishing.
This is like real fly tying. Not perfect for me.
The more that I got into it, the more materials I begin to find, because a lot of my work still uses a lot of found materials. So I begin to see the flies as these small sculptures. Being a black dude growing up in the South who grew up bass fishing, like fly fishing sort of seems like something foreign. Just through YouTube and through my own sort of self-determination, I taught myself to tie flies. I taught myself to cast. I taught myself everything about fly fishing, sort of DIY, because that's that punk rock sort of spirit, that attitude is something that I rely heavily on. Like any dude who grew up listening to 90s era hip hop was just like, can I remix this? The aesthetics of fly fishing, for me, just seem extra boring. Everything is blue.
Can they be a little funky?
Everything is brown.
Can get design on it.
And everything is gray.
Something on the leg or on the chest.
And I have a lot more flavor than that. So I begin to pay attention to how I would dress to go out on the river to distinguish myself different from the other men and waders on the river. Living in Atlanta and then having my studio where it is, it just seemed like the natural thing to do was to use materials that were readily available. I mean, you can hear in here, it's a full-on warehouse and the trains are going by. It only makes sense for me to respond to that material and then take those responses into a wild space. It also was like an idea of me taking something from the black community, blunt wraps, wrap snacks.
Let me show you. And I'm using a blunt wrapper.
Or peppermint patties or things that you find in the community.
Gotta go to the ghetto to get these materials.
And then hiding them within the beauty of some of these strange feathers.
Leave Montana, go to your closest hood spot and find you some Rillos.
I begin to think about these things that were discarded, like the paper, the trash, the stuff that's in the river, like thinking about it in a conservation sort of way also, is that I can take these materials that I find, pick that trash up, repurpose it, cut them, slice them, bend them, twist them onto a hook, fish it, keep it in my box, remove something from the creek bed or from my urban environment. One of the flies that first sort of interested me was the stimulator. I thought for sure that this fly had some sort of African origin. The aesthetics of a stimulator doesn't seem like anything European to me. It seems like very warrior-like, very Zulu-like, very African. It seems very strong. It seems very sort of native. And the aesthetic of that had me like sort of start to learn the history of fly tying. The further and further I got into it, the more and more I began to realize that there was this tradition and there was this sort of rigidness to this tradition. Being a black man into fly fishing and one that's like highly creative, I think that I'm totally challenging the ways of traditional fly fishing. I think as long as I stay true to my intentions and stay true to who I am as a man, as a black man, as a fisher, as an artist, and as one who's trying to uphold an idea of family tradition of fishing, like I think that I will navigate these spaces, or I continue to navigate these spaces by just being myself. And I worked really hard to try and do that, and I think that I've come up with something that I think is cool, and it's kind of based off all the flies that I've ever loved, and that fly is gonna be a Georgia dry rub.
It's amazing. I met Michi 5 years ago. We met at an open studio show.
At the time, I was working with another gallery, and I was in pursuit of like these higher goals or these things that I'm after. But I had met Courtney at a show and
Had a long talk, and I asked him the same question I ask every artist I work with. What do you want? What are your ambitions? What do you want to do?
And she was saying all this stuff about how she doesn't poach and she doesn't like steal artists away from galleries and this and that. But I just kind of looked at her and was like, I'm too ambitious for you.
Michi's response to that question was that he was ambitious and wanted to kind of see where he could go with the work.
And she was like, I'm ambitious too. And I was like, all right, we'll see.
And so that kind of started our conversation. Hi, my name is Courtney Bombeck. I am the owner of Co-op Art ATL. I am Michi Meko's representative in the Southeast.
She is just as hard-nosed and punk rock as I am, or as hip-hop as I am. She's as DIY as I am.
My goal as somebody who works with the artist here is to help people navigate where they go so that they're not just ticking a box for someone, and they can have longevity within their career. The fact that I live in a more rarefied world, so to speak, wealthy white woman from Buckhead, I have access to people who would like to have access to good work.
She has good intentions to help people here locally build world-class collections, and that's rare.
I'm just trying to get Atlanta to buy good work, basically.
I don't know, she's scrappy, man, but she's so sophisticated in her world, you know what I mean?
Michi, I am the person in the Southeast you need to talk to.
Having a bad guy, I think, is something that I always wanted, and it's just like, my bad guy is Courtney, she happens to be a white woman. You know what I mean?
It's an interesting time now to be an artist of color because the world has realized that there's been this incredible resource that's almost been neglected. With everything that's kind of developed in social movements, so to speak, in the last few years, you have all these people scrambling. And that's been a good thing and a not so good thing because there's been people who have jumped on it as you would a trend. It's good in that a lot of people who didn't have attention before are now getting the attention they deserve. And it's bad because what happens to trends, they end. As a friend of mine told me, you're using your position of privilege to kind of help maybe get this work seen places where it wouldn't be necessarily seen. Racism is so no longer this, easy thing to define. There's shades of it. People think of the art world being a more liberal place to live and work. And it is to a certain extent. It's kind of like sexism, you know? It's like, well, we have a woman artist, or we have a black artist, or we have a black woman artist, you know? In the Southeast, we have this amazing source of all these people and this diversity of all these people. So why not, you know, kind of see the diversity of the art? Art in and of itself exists to start a conversation. When the work is strong and good, it affects everybody. And sometimes they don't even understand why. That's the beauty of Michi's work. I stress the importance of being a patron in your own backyard. And if you do have privilege, using it to create opportunities for people who would not normally have these opportunities. Because otherwise we lose these artists, they leave.
What's it like being a black artist? I don't know. I never really considered it because I've just been black my whole life. Like for me, I see it as a superpower. Like I have some freedoms that a lot of other artists don't have. And within that freedom, there's a place that me and some of my friends who are artists and who are makers refer to as the funk. Without the funk, there wouldn't be hip hop, and without the jazz, there wouldn't be the disco and the funk and the hip hop. So there's all these lineages of these sort of free movements of thought within black culture. When you think about like Americanisms, like within the Americanisms, there's this thing called black culture, and in that black culture, there's this freedom of expression that then comes out, that then becomes Americanisms. Like all the dances, all the music, all the language, all the things, fashion, like even aesthetics, like a lot of those its origins are within black culture. So I think that there's a huge freedom in that. I've never been one to doubt myself or to feel lesser than because I am black. My only thing is just like, if there's an opportunity and there's a door, and if you show it to me, I'm gonna go through it. I'll get there. I don't know how I'll get there, but I'll show you. That's been a real like sort of superpower to be able to live in the funk and sort of play in the funk, and I get to pull from inspiration and a pain that no other culture has. I sort of entered into fly fishing as a way to challenge myself, like to DIY it, like down to the flies, like buying a fly rod, teaching myself how to do it, watching YouTube videos. And then I began to realize, like in the rivers and creeks that I fish, I don't have to have a perfect cast. Like I gotta know how to get it up under rhododendron, you know what I mean? I just sort of started to think about like environment and then these ideas of like, this is how a cast should be, and this is how a fly should be, this is how fly fishing should be, and I'm just like, fuck that, it's not real, it's not true, at least for me. I really want my approach to fly fishing to be like that of my art. That's just the hip hop, that's just the punk rock, that's just the blackness, the funk, the soul. Because James Brown is on the one. Is a table fixed when you put a napkin under it to keep it from rocking? It's still off, but at that moment when you slide the napkin on it, you found a solution, and so that table has been fixed. I kind of want to see fly fishing as that, as like, maybe I'm the napkin going under the table to keep it from wobbling and to straighten it itself, or maybe I'm just the frickin' wobble and you gotta deal with it, you know? I think that I'm searching for a truth. I think that I'm searching for like my version of the truth, or a version of freedom and what that means. And for me right now, that truth sort of exists in nature. It exists in the idea of me inserting myself in these wild spaces, I've become my own sort of joke. I've become all the things that I've made fun of. Like, I'm a heavily abstractionist. Here I am abstracting the landscape. I was a conventional reel fisher, fishing for big bass. Now I'm fishing with a fly rod, and it's like that was something I always made fun of. But I've allowed myself to laugh at myself and to accept these changes and become these things and explore these environments or this form of fishing and try to figure out what that poem is. Yeah, I think there's a moment for a truth in there. I think that's all I'm after. It's like some sort of freedom that's defined on my own terms and a truth.